Star Wars 7 by 7 episode 2138 today. Another installment of Star Wars Pop. That's Podcasters on Podcasting. And today I'm talking with Joe and Chris from Brews and Blasters. Punch it! Hey Rebel Rouser, I'm Alan Voivod, and this is Star Wars 7 by 7, your daily dose of Star Wars joy, and thank you so much for joining me for it. So I would normally have run this on Sunday, but since it was Mother's Day, I wanted to focus on mothers for the day, and so we moved this one over to Monday for you. So it's a little bit of a longer show. If you join us on a regular basis, you know that generally speaking, the episodes are between 7 and 14 minutes, 7 to 10 minutes. I'm usually trying to keep it in single digits, but these conversations are longer ones, and this time I am welcoming Joe Tavano and Chris Salton onto the show. Here's the deal with their show, Brews and Blasters. It says, born from the discussions between two friends at a local pub in the historic town of Salem, Massachusetts, the Star Wars podcast is your chance to kick back and enjoy everything about that galaxy far, far away. Each episode hosts Chris Salton and Joe Tavano sit down every week to do what they would be doing anyway, talk about all things Star Wars, tell some stories, and have a good time. Join them as they share their love for Star Wars, the most obscure Star Wars characters, Boston's North Shore, 1980s pop culture, and delicious food, and occasionally talk to fascinating people and friends like an anthropomorphic packet of crystallized lime. I don't know quite what they mean by that, and we don't get into it in this discussion, but we get into a lot of other fascinating stuff as well, and that conversation is going to begin in just a moment. Before we get to it, though, I do want to say thank you so much, as always, for joining me for the show, and may the curve be flattening for you wherever in the world you may be. And now, without further ado, my conversation with Chris and Joe from Brews and Blasters. Joe, Chris, thank you so much for joining me on Star Wars 7 by 7. How are you both doing?
We are doing excellent.
Wonderful. So glad to hear that. Thank you both for saying yes to coming on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having us, man.
Oh. I love Star Wars 7 by 7. I listen to it, all the time. Sometimes I'll just take a whole week and just listen to it on one run, and then sometimes, I'm there every single morning. So, thank you for being the most consistent Star Wars podcast out there, that I know of.
Thank you very much. I promise I wasn't fishing for that compliment, but thank you. I appreciate it all the same.
So, no, I really appreciate it.
So I'm glad to have you both on for another episode of Star Wars Pop, which is Podcasters on Podcasting. And as we do with everybody who's come on the show, we have a set of questions that I like to ask. And so I'll start with this one and ask Joe for you to answer it first, and Chris chime in as you wish. How did you get into Star Wars podcasting?
Oof. Wow, it's almost a loaded question, because it seemed like a couple of things all happened at once. So I started RetroZap at a point where I was working from home and like kind of a freelance job, and I had a lot of time on my hands, so I decided to kind of stretch out my writing chops and start writing, and that evolved into RetroZap. Around that same time, I published a couple of articles that got notoriety in some small Star Wars community circles, and I was asked to go on a couple of shows, namely Techno Retro Dads and the Star Wars Report.
Okay.
That was around November 2014. However, I was very nervous. It really, I was terrible on these shows. I was like, like a deer in headlights when they went to me every time. But at the exact same time, Chris and I were going to a local bar called the Tin Whistle to pretty much catch up about every week and talk about Star Wars. And one night we just decided this should be a show. And right around that same time, we pretty much had the idea for Brews and Blasters, and we got that right into development. And that's once we started recording, that was it for me. I was hooked. But I don't know. I wonder if Chris has a different memory of how he got into this.
Well, it's really funny because before we started podcasting, I wasn't really savvy with social media. I didn't really care much about it. I got all my news from like StarWars.com or something like that. I didn't have Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. I had Facebook, but it was for something else. And but we did meet up at the Whistle quite often, and we would always just have a handful of beers, and we would talk Star Wars, obviously, and we would get a little goofy, and we would get a little serious. And then Joe always talked about like Rebel Force Radio and Star Wars in character. And like I said, I wasn't really into, that world yet. Mm-hmm. And you were always like, dude, you got to listen to it. Dude, you got to listen to it. Did you listen to it? And I'm like, nah. and we're always like, oh, we should start a podcast. And I'm like, I don't know what that is. I guess a radio show. We'll start a radio show. And, then, Joe just went down this rabbit hole of being like, hey, I got equipment. Hey, I got this. And then I went to his house, and, he had like a mixer and all these buttons. And I'm like, dude, what is going on? And then next thing I know, we're recording, and it was really a perfect time to launch because the Force Awakens was coming out. So we got our feet wet. We did a lot of practice shows, and one thing led into another. I mean, nobody's perfect, but I mean, the sound quality is great. Joe really knows what he's doing with the knobs, and I just put on the Yoda light and kick back.
There you go. Yeah, it really was fun. We used to, those early days, we had no idea what we were doing at all. We still don't, but we really didn't have any idea at all. I remember there were a couple of shows that will never see the light of day. They were literally just test shows for us. And even before that, it was almost like that episode of Seinfeld where Jerry and George are sitting around like, what's the show going to be about? I don't know. It's about nothing. It's like, we were just literally talking, and it's like, Chris was like, he came up with the name. He's like, the show should be called Brews and Blasters. Then he went to the bathroom, and I'm like, oh my God, that's the greatest name ever. And that's literally how it happened.
Well, it was that was definitely a collaboration. But I remember this, and I don't know if you remember. We're gonna take a picture of a DL-44 and put it on the table. And take a picture of it with all our pint glasses. And, obviously that it sounded great. It didn't happen. Maybe it will one day. I mean, it's been 5 years. It hasn't been 5 years. Yeah, I think it's been 5 years.
Closer to 6.
Exactly. Yeah, we're rolling on 6. And it still could be in the works.
And we'll figure it out one of these days.
For your 6th anniversary, maybe.
Yeah.
Sure.
So coming up on 6 years. Congratulations. Actually, that's me as well. In July, it'll be 6 years for me.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
No way.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You're like a firmament. I always pictured Star Wars 7x7 as being around for a long time. It's amazing. It's just when we were starting, you were one of the big shows out there, and that's really cool. I can't believe that. Wow.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things where you wonder, how did people forget about the Jedi after 20 years? And then, these past 8 weeks of quarantine, I don't even remember what it's like outside. I can see how generations utterly thought the Jedi were a myth. I feel like downtown Concord, New Hampshire is a myth to me right now.
Essentially, yeah. But that 2013, 2014 time was just an explosion of podcasting.
Mm-hmm.
It was, yeah.
Where that's really when Star Wars podcasting really started to rise up and become this massive movement that it is now.
Right.
What's really funny is I feel like it was kind of pure luck for us to launch at that time, because it wasn't our intentions being hey, if we do it now's the time it's going to be hot. It just happened to be when we're talking a lot about it. And,
fun.
I think, well, we started really talking when Disney bought it, and we're wow, what's going on? New movies? What, you know what I mean? And it was just all speculation and what's it going to be, So, maybe that's when we really started talking a lot about it. Obviously, when you have a couple of drinks, you talk a lot more about it. And
we had that game. Remember the game we had?
Yeah, drink as fast as you can.
Drink as fast as you can until we got texted by the wives.
Oh,
Yeah,
that was the game. All right.
Yeah. Younger days.
Yeah, how many can we have? Yeah, I mean, it wasn't. It was just pure luck, honestly. With timing, because it wasn't our intention to be honest with you. We still can't believe people listen anyway. So like,
no, it's amazing to us.
So I have a feeling that beer might be involved in the answer to this next question, but you can obviously disabuse me of that notion. But Chris, I'll ask you to go first on this one. What's your favorite thing about being a Star Wars podcaster?
Honestly, meeting all of you guys, because I'll tell you, when I got involved with this and, every other platform that we're on, it made conventions a little bit differently because, like I was just saying, we never really, started this and expected people to listen or write emails or whatever. And now, I'm not saying a lot of people, but it's like a handful of people will go to conventions and they're like, hey, I really enjoy your podcast. And I'm like, wow, okay. Wasn't Joe? Remember when the last time we were at Rhode Island Comic Con, we were literally just talking to a vendor, and I don't know if it was like our voices sounded familiar to him, and he was like, "Hey, do you guys do Brews and Blasters?" And I was like, "That's kind of crazy," like.
Yeah, it really is. That really was something, especially when we went to Celebration Orlando in 2017. That was, it really was pretty amazing. I think the favorite thing about being a Star Wars podcaster, like you said, Chris, it's the friendships you meet, the friendships in the community, the friendships you meet from listeners, and us just getting to hang out, every time we podcast. Like Chris is one of my best friends, and I love, just having a reason as we get older just to get together and hang out. I mean, that's just the best thing in the world.
I mean, I'm not really a sports guy, but I mean, I feel like if you're a sports guy, it's pretty easy to have like, a lot of buddies that are into sports. It's something that you all love and care about, and it's just easy. With Star Wars, for the longest time, it kind of seemed like, it was almost like we're like underground, you kind of didn't want to be like Boo Schnick in Star Wars because people would be like, you nerd. And now there's like this, now there's this like wide audience and so many people that are just as passionate as we are. And it really just stems back to all the people that we've met. And, some nice friendships have been made. And it gives you a range to, I mean, we had Dave Collins on. We talked to Dave Collins, and we're kind of just like, talking just like this. And he really enjoyed himself. And he was on the show for an extra hour that wasn't planned.
Wow.
Because he was having fun. And I would love to have him on again. But I mean, exactly. Yeah. And it's just like one of those things, you know what I mean? Like you never know who you're going to reach out to or how far your voice is going to travel. We have people from like over the pond, that we talk to. It's just a really exciting thing. It's a really cool community.
Yeah, it is. Oh, yeah. I like that answer. Thank you. All right, so let me go with Joe for this next one. And this probably has a pre/post-quarantine answer and a current answer, but where do you guys record your podcast?
So we have a couple of incarnations of this. The show started at my place before we had Chris and I both had kids in our houses, and we would record in kind of a back room that I had known as the cave. And it was it was one small window that led up to like the ground level, and it just had great acoustics, and we would just go back there and have a good time, and that's where the mics were set up, and we had the mixer kind of there. But once my daughter was born in 2018, we needed a different setup because that had to become the baby's room. Mm-hmm. So things switched over to Chris's house, and he created the Beat Lab. And to take a Step Brothers reference, I think that's a Step Brothers reference, right?
Yeah,
that sounds familiar. Yeah,
Beat Lab / the dungeon, because it was like the boiler room. We kind of like kind of put up like a makeshift like wall, which consisted of soundproof matting that Joe picked up, and we put them on like basically like a shower curtain. And like I said,
to his house. It's like, yeah, it's like, did you buy this rug for me? I'm like, yeah.
yeah, a box came, and I'm like, what are these two things? All right, whatever, we're gonna make it work.
Joe's buying stuff.
Yeah, we got like soundproofing for the Salem and all kinds of stuff like that. But now with this whole being quarantined and stuff like that, I kind of thought it would be the perfect time to actually make that room a finished room and make it like nice and comfortable and pretty. So I ripped everything out and I just finished the whole thing. And, it'll be really nice for Joe to see it. There's actually heat in there. We're not going to freeze to death.
Wow.
There's AC. There's, everything we need is in there. I even put a dimmer in there, Joe, because I thought the light was too bright.
Oh, I like that. I need that dimmer. I'm sitting in my
Joe
walk.
hasn't even... Yeah, Joe hasn't seen this room yet, so...
Not at all.
Not even photos or video or anything?
Yeah.
I saw a photo.
I did a play-by-play with him. Like, it was like me ripping everything out, then this studs, then this insulation, like, just keeping them posted.
Yeah. So right now, yeah, I'm in a walk-in closet during this quarantine era, and and Chris is in his basement. But yeah, we're doing it remote until it's safe to all be together. Mm-hmm. But hopefully that'll be soon, and I can't wait to get back into the new and improved Beat Lab.
All right, so this next one we'll start with you, Chris. What do you draw on for inspiration for your podcast?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Yeah, what do you draw on for inspiration for your podcast?
Well, a lot of it stems from what we recently just seen or heard. Mm-hmm. But when there is no news, we're always collecting. We're always, buying something really neat. And even if it's slow, then we talk about food, what we've been eating and stuff like that. So there's always something to talk about. It's like Joe was just saying, like we could literally just keep talking and talking and talking. But yeah, we're known to snowball down it just goes everywhere. There's been times that we're talking about something pretty serious, and then we'll be talking about, I don't know, porcelain knobs or something. Like it gets wacky.
So here's the thing, I've known Chris for about 20 years.
Oh wow.
He was we've known each other for a long time, and we have been kind of doing talking Star Wars for a good 12, 13 years now. Oh. Pretty hardcore. And, what happened with the podcast is that it's just a natural evolution of our conversations. That's all it is. We've never tried to really produce those conversations. We've really never tried to make them anything more than us, how we talk normally. Okay. So, we go on tangents when we go on tangents. And, one thing I always wanted to do was to never fight that. You know what I mean? Go into it, get crazy with it, have fun with it. And that's always been like one direction that I never wanted to, keep us on track, because that would ruin our momentum and ruin our vibe. Mm-hmm. Keeping it honest and keeping it as authentic to how we talk and have a good time is what it's all about.
We're not known to like break news or be extremely serious about something. I think the only time that we're like extremely serious is when Carrie Fisher passed. Mm-hmm. Kenny Baker, Peter May. When we lose somebody in this amazing franchise, but that's the only time that you'll like really hear it in our voice. Obviously, when we got married and had children as well, I wanted to put that on record. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we're the place that, we want to be the place that people go to that you can like, kick your shoes off and just have a good time. And, I think we're getting there.
We call it the Star Wars party. That's literally what we want. That's what we brand our show as. It's not the Star Wars news show. It's not, the interview show per se. It's the party. We may have guests. We may go down deep rabbit holes. We may get very analytical and introspective sometimes. But overall, it's all about having a good time within that context.
Yeah, I mean, I literally think we're recapping Rise of Skywalker, and then it ends up talking about Richard Grieco looks like a cat.
Why on earth did Richard Grieco come up into this? I mean, well, that's probably its own other story, I imagine.
Oh,
there's a lot of stories about Grieco.
There's, you know something? I think there's more than there should be.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. We talk about Richard Grieco way too much. I think we were going to meet him at a convention, but he didn't want to. I don't know. He didn't want to do like a something. So he became like our joking nemesis on the show.
Okay.
The Catman. That's it.
Catman.
Yeah. You know, I had a whole other answer for that question, but it's like, oh God, my inspirations were other, podcasts I listen to and, comedians and things like that. But yeah, no, this answer is much better. I like this one.
I just got you all fired up.
Oh yeah.
Damn you, Grieco.
Damn you, Grieco.
All right, we're gonna have to have a conversation about Grieco after this recording because I want to go down this rabbit hole with you, and I'm gonna save the listeners on this one and try and keep it focused.
See, Alan, we brought Star Wars 7x7 into a tangent just now. We did it. This is what we do. The pros.
You did. Yes, you did. All right, Joe, I'll go with you for the start on this one. Aside from present company, what other Star Wars podcasts do you enjoy, and non-Star Wars ones? And I will give you the caveat that I give everybody else that if somebody else from another podcast is listening and is expecting Joe or Chris to name their podcast and they don't do it on the spot, don't take it personally. Sometimes it just flies out of people's brains, and so with that safety caveat, go ahead and answer. What Star Wars and non-Star Wars podcasts do you like?
Sure. Well, I enjoy all of the fine shows on the RetroZap Podcast Network. That is a gift. Absolutely. I have listened to a lot of Star Wars podcasts over the years. There are a ton out there, and I've guested on a few here and there too, and that's been great. And I try to spread my wings a little bit. There's plenty of great shows out there, non-Star Wars too, like the soundtrack shows. David Collins, as we talked about, I think is an absolutely fantastic produced podcast. I love a podcast by this guy Matt, who goes by Dinosaur Dracula online, and he does the Purple Stuff podcast, and that is just hilarious and a great retro deep dive into just wacky stuff. I listened to Joe Rogan, believe it or not. I just recently got into that. I think he's actually an unbelievable interviewer, and there's so many things you can learn about broadcasting from Rogan. Just how he conducts an interview and how he can keep a conversation going. Even though he definitely has a meathead sort of persona that's out there, but there is also quite a bit to learn from a person who's been doing this for over 10 years as well.
Mm-hmm. All right. Yeah.
Yeah. I listen to a lot more than that. I listen to Giant Bombcast, is one of the first ones I ever listened to. That's a video game podcast. Really funny. A lot of great stuff there too. And that's actually was a huge inspiration for me when I started podcasting as well. Just their vibe was huge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And there's plenty more in there, but there's I could go on and on about the podcast I listen to. I think like everyone else pretty much could.
That's a good sampling, I would say.
Yeah, it's a lot of different ones out there that you may not have heard of.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
How about you, Chris?
Non-Star Wars, I like listening to Bill Burr. He's really funny, and I could just listen to him go on rants about things all the time. I do listen to like a lot of stand-ups. As far as Star Wars goes, I listen to a handful, but I always find myself gravitating towards Star Wars and character. They just have a great dynamic between the four. I mean, it could be 4, 3, 2. It doesn't really matter. The show is pretty consistent, and it's just enjoyable. And man, they get wacky, they get serious. You get a little bit of everything with them.
Yeah.
But yeah, you know, my time is like limited now, just because, you know, I might have like the little guy with me, and you know, you have to put on, like, you know, like his like Disney Channel and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So if I'm cruising by myself, you know, I'll pop on, you know, a podcast, and that will last me like 2 days because I'll be listening to it in chunks.
Mm-hmm.
You know, or if I want to catch up on music or stand up or something like that. But I mean, that's basically like where I'm at.
Gotcha. Excellent. Well, Chris, let's stick with you, and I'll ask you the next question. What, in your opinion, is the secret to a great Star Wars podcast?
You definitely have to be friends with the person that you're podcasting with, because that would be pretty uncomfortable, right? Yeah, I mean, obviously sharing the same love for something, passion, and you know, just to have fun. I can't really stress that enough. You know, you can't be serious all the time, and you don't let it go to your head that you're trying to be like the best one out there. Just, you have to really throw all that stuff away. You have to forget that you hit the record button, and you have to have fun, and you have to be yourself, and just don't take it serious.
Yeah, you have to be authentic. Number one, be who you are. Don't try to emulate anyone else that you like, or anyone who you think is influential in Star Wars podcasting. Just don't try for any of that stuff. Be authentic first and foremost. That's the best thing you could possibly do to produce a great show. And if you produce a great show, you're going to have people who listen. Because people can snuff out, you know, fakeness and inauthenticity super quickly. So you have to be yourself, number one, first and foremost. Yeah, and second of all, don't try, if you're not doing it, if you're doing this to get something for free, you're doing it to get, you know, passes or merchandise or anything like that, you know, it may not be the right thing for you, because you're going to burn out quickly. You're going to get frustrated. If you're looking into it to get notoriety, it's going to be a long road for you too. Mm-hmm. Those are not the best reasons to go into this. And you know, the best secret I think I could give anyone starting a Star Wars podcast is to stay off social media as much as possible. I swear. And it's a hard lesson that we've learned over the years, but I think in 2020, promote your show, build a community, but do not get drawn into social media. Stay off it. There's the Star Wars community is more than just what you see on your Twitter feed or your Facebook feed or anything like that. There is so much more out there than that. And just go to the light. Yeah.
All right. So last official question for you guys, and it's a two-parter. So Joe, I'll kick this one to you first. What is your biggest Star Wars podcasting achievement so far, and your greatest ambition for the podcast in the future?
Yeah. So my greatest ambition for the podcast would probably be for Chris's son and my daughter to continue this. That'd be hilarious. That'd be absolutely hilarious. Could you imagine that, Chris?
To be honest with you, I never even thought of that, and I think it would be hilarious in a good way.
Yeah, I would love that. That would be unbelievable. Yeah, and I feel like, yeah, man, the biggest achievement we ever had.
Yeah, this is a hard one.
You know what I'm gonna say, Chris? I'm gonna say the party we had at Celebration Orlando. Do you remember that?
Yeah, it was
like
a lot
that
of fun.
first night.
Dude, you know what was so funny about that? Well, I mean, you know this, Joe, but no one else does. But if you've been to Celebration or any con, you're wiped at the end of the day. Yeah. Your legs hurt, your feet are burning, you know, you're just
like
tired.
Day one, too.
Yeah. So, like, I remember me and Alexa, you know, we got up to the room, and like I just lay down for like a second, and I could just kind of feel my body melting. Like that's how like exhausted I was. Yeah. And Joe's texting me. He's like, "Dude, where are you? Dude, where are you? Like, I coming? There's people here. They're asking." And I'm like, "Dude, there's no one there. Like, no one listens." You know, like, and it's so I'm being so truthful, because it's like I said, like I don't, you know, we're still amazed people listen. So yeah. And then Joe's like, "No, dude, I'm telling you, like, there's people here." And I'm like, all right, I'll come down. I'll be down. Right. So, and then I go down, and I'm like, oh, wow. There there had to be at least 30 people there, like maybe even more, you know.
And
Wow.
it blew over the night. That was like early. It became like this thing. It was unbelievable.
And I hate calling them strangers because like I don't want to make it sound like it's an offensive word, but it's people that I've never met in person before, but we probably talk to on social media.
Right.
And it's something else when you walk into a place and people are wearing your T-shirt, you know, and I'm like, wow, like they care, like they actually care, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And just having that community that night was an unbelievable thing. Because we had no idea. We put it out into the world. We told people we're going to be down there. We told them where we're going to be having our party. And I remember it was myself and Dennis Keithley from Podcast Stardust, who is a really good friend of mine. And we had, gone over to the bar and we ordered some food and we ordered some drinks. And we're like, well, let's see what happens. We didn't know what was going to happen. We're like, well, maybe people will show up, maybe they won't, and we'll just have a good time. And all of a sudden, they came, and it was great. And I started texting. I'm like, Chris, get down, Chris. It's happening. It's real. Get out. I could just see his face. He's like, get out of here. No way. And then it was, and we closed that place down.
Yeah, I think I showed up in sandals. Like that's how serious I was taking it.
You were in sandals that whole weekend. What are you
Dude,
talking about?
I'm a sandals guy.
You love sandals. You love sandals. Yeah, we
sandals in the winter too, I assume, right?
Yeah.
You know something? I recently did just put them on.
Ah.
I know. I think technically are we still in winter?
No.
No.
We're in what? We're
in spring easy. We've been in spring for over a month.
We're doing all right.
But it's been frigid though for a spring.
Well, it's been like the mornings and the nights are cold. With this whole quarantine, I've been like my head's been spinning with days. I'm getting lost with the days, and I literally was looking at the calendar today, and I'm like, wait a second, that's not that day. And it took me about 3 minutes to realize that I was on the wrong month. So when everything goes back when everything goes back to normal, it's going to be like reality's going to hit hard, man.
Yeah, it will.
So does that cover you too, Chris, for your answer to that question, or do you have another achievement to share and another ambition to share?
Well, achievements. It's always nice when Joe sends me a screenshot of an email that somebody sent that that they weren't doing so great or they were sick and they were listening to our podcast and it made them feel better. That's always pretty incredible. That's a really amazing feeling that, somebody could not be doing that well and they decided to put us on for some weird reason, Every
once in a while, these emails, that like someone's sick or they're down and they're having a hard time. And it means the world to us.
Yeah, or like not that we ask for stuff, but when people randomly send us like cool, like thoughtful things, like, hey, here's some coasters that I made out of a tree. You guys can put your it's it was cool. It's like
we still use them.
We actually still use them. Yeah,
they're fantastic.
And I mean. It's just a cool thing, I know that's kind of a lame answer, but I mean the more I think about, because it's been so long and it's hard to like really remember everything, but it's been one hell of a ride, I'll tell you that much.
So for anybody listening who wants to check out the Star Wars party happening on Brews and Blasters, where should they go?
The website is brewsandblasters.ninja. We bought .ninja because .com wasn't enough. Because who else buys .ninja? It's out there. You can have any website .ninja if you want it, and that's us.
That's awesome. Joe, Chris, thank you so much for joining me for this installment of Star Wars Pop that's Podcasters on Podcasting. It was great to talk with you guys.
You too, man. Thank you.
This podcast is not endorsed or sponsored yet by Lucasfilm Limited, Disney, or 20th Century Fox. It is intended for entertainment and information purposes only. Star Wars, the Star Wars logo, all names and pictures of Star Wars characters, vehicles, and any other related Star Wars items are registered trademarks and/or copyrights of Lucasfilm Limited or their respective trademark and copyright holders. May the Force be with them. All original content is copyright 2019 by Star Wars 7x7. We hope you love it.